Hey guys, Tom with Elevation Every Weekend here. I teased in a recent short video that I purchased my first ever triathlon bike, or TT bike, which stands for time trial. It is a new to me 2020 Giant Trinity Advanced. Before I dive into some of the specifics of the bike itself, I did want to give just a little bit of background on why I would purchase such a bike, especially since it's at the other end of the spectrum to the types of bikes you typically see featured on my channel, such as fat bikes and adventure bikes. So a little background on me: I've always ridden bikes and I've always been a fan of professional cycling and always followed it. And over the years, one of my favorite events to watch and follow is the time trial, which, whether you're talking about the Olympics or obviously in professional cycling, is an individual race against the clock. Just the concept of a person going to the limits and drilling it as hard as they can for a period of time has always fascinated me. And this is, generally speaking, the type of bike they would use, which is a aerodynamic and a bike designed to put down the maximum power. In addition to the time trial, I've always been a casual fan of triathlon, going all the way back to when I was a kid watching the Kona World Championship on the Wide World of Sports. Back in 2010, I made the transition from going to a pure pavement road rider to shifting my focus to trying to ride into more mixed use, including more dirt. And as a result, I bought my 2010 Giant TCX2 cyclocross bike, which I still own and love and currently have set up on my trainer. And you've seen it featured on the channel a couple times as well. Ironically, the day I bought that bike, the bike shop also had a 2011 Giant Trinity on the shop floor. And because I've always loved the time trial, I was briefly tempted to maybe check it out, but ultimately I think I definitely made the right decision in buying the cross bike, which is a bike I knew that would fit my needs best, as at that time a TT bike was still largely an unknown for me. Despite that brief temptation, I've still always longed to own a time trial or triathlon bike. But after moving to Colorado in 2011, my interest actually shifted even more into the mountain bike side of things, and then ultimately, as you're well aware, fat bikes, and my interests still are largely in those areas. So short story long, in the last year I've really become enamored with the sport of triathlon, and I've been thinking more and more about it being a challenge I might want to take on. So that, combined with the desire to always own a time trial bike anyways, led me to actually start to search to purchase a TT or triathlon bike. And again, if you have followed any of my previous videos, you may remember I did add drop bars and aero bars to my Salsa Bear Grease. That change, combined with converting it to a 29 plus wheel set, was really geared to make it kind of my ultimate adventure bike for this year. However, the exceptionally positive experience I've had riding that bike in the aero bars confirmed to me that not only is there a lot of merit to it, not only do I really enjoy it, but I can ride in the aero bars for long periods of time, and physiologically I'm able to put down good power. So ultimately that did really confirm and feed into my desire to get a legitimate TT triathlon bike. So how did I end up with this specific bike here? TT bikes are quite expensive, especially the most modern current versions. I actually looked at and considered several brand new so-called mid-range versions, but even all of those were falling into the $4,000 to $5,000 range, and that was definitely enough to certainly give me pause on pulling the trigger. And even though there are some pretty good options out there that are in the more entry-level TT bike range, even those run close to $3,000 typically. And over the last several months trying to search for those, most of those were just not available currently. Going all the way back to 2010, I've always been a big fan of the Giant Trinity, but I did have a little bit of pause about investing a significant amount of money in a current new bike that was still using rim brakes, as even most TT bikes now are shifting to disc brakes. But despite the 6-year-old design of this frame right here, and it's still running rim brakes, there's still athletes at the highest level of the pro peloton and triathlon winning races. So it is still objectively a very fast bike. And Giant does offer a 2022 version of this very bike right here, but it was not available at this time. So I just continued to bide my time, look at various websites, see what was going to become available first, and obviously started looking at the used market. And I actually stumbled on this bike right here on the Pros Closet, who are local to me. So I went ahead and pulled the trigger and was able to get this bike for about $2,300 and go pick it up. And now that I have the bike, I can say it was definitely a great decision. From a budget value standpoint, it seems to be excellent. It's in fantastic shape, and being a 2020 and looking at the shape of the bike, I'm not really concerned about it having an excessive amount of miles on it like some older bikes may. So whether I keep this bike shorter term and decide I can justify upgrading to something better in the next couple years, or if I just decide to add some parts to this bike here and keep it long term, I think it's going to be a great option. So before I dive more specifically into the specs and features of this bike here, I just wanted to give a little more information on the difference between a TT and a triathlon bike. So as I mentioned already, TT would stand for time trial and would typically be something that occurs in professional cycling. The UCI, which governs pro cycling, has very strict guidelines for what the bike can be as far as the design, the tube shapes, and things like that. So a UCI legal bike will look very much like this one here, which is UCI legal. In the sport of triathlon, even though a bike may be based very much on this sort of bike right here, they have much more freedom to be more extreme with the aero engineering, tube shapes, and even some bikes are not the traditional bike shape at all. So let's go ahead and get into the specifics and the details on this very bike. So in North America, the Giant Trinity has two models. It has this model here, the Advanced, and does have one level up called the Advanced Pro. Both bikes use the exact same high modulus carbon frame. And as I mentioned, while this is the UCI legal bike, the Pro version is geared more towards triathlon. It has some more aerodynamic parts on it that would not be UCI legal, and has a larger, more aerodynamic integrated headset and fork setup. But actually, one of the advantages to this bike is that the cockpit and the headset and the fork are not anything special, meaning they use standard parts and they're easy to break down and reassemble if necessary. So anyone with common bike skills can handle this bike. One of the downsides to this setup is you do have the exposed cables, whereas on the more expensive version, all the cables are routed into the headset. And that's done for cleanliness and aerodynamics. But again, having this accessible definitely makes it easier to handle. The drivetrain on this bike is Shimano 105. It's a 2x11 setup, and it does have Dura Ace shifters at the end of the aero bars. It has 50/34 chain rings in the front and a 11/28 cassette in the rear. And thus far for me, it's performed very reliably well. I haven't had any issues with the shifting, and the gear range has been adequate for the riding I've done thus far. So even on this more entry-level bike that has rim brakes, it is still quite aero. As you can see, the front brake is still behind the fork, and the rear brake is down here under the bottom bracket. A lot of other entry-level triathlon TT bikes on the market will still use rim brakes, and they'll have them in more traditional positions, such as on top of the front of the fork and then on top of the rear of the seat stays. So again, even as a more entry-level bike, this has some thoughtful aero touches that really make it a good value. And obviously, while the rim brakes are not a standout, especially compared to a disc brake bike, they are adequate, and it is a time trial bike, meaning it's really built to go fast. It's not the kind of bike you would be using on steep mountain descents. And I'm not using carbon wheels, which can be a little more questionable with rim braking, especially in like wet weather. The typical compound brake pads on the aluminum wheels do a fair job on stopping. And speaking of the wheels, this bike did not come with the stock Giant wheels. It was changed or upgraded to a set of Alex rims DA22s, which is basically just a lower end road wheel set. And as a training wheel set, they've been fine so far, but it's definitely an area I would like to upgrade to something more aero. And like most other bikes in the bike industry these days, tubeless is also becoming an option in triathlon and TT bikes. So definitely something I'd probably be interested in checking out as well, since I run tubeless on most of my other bikes. Otherwise, I do have a few minor mods in the work. I am having a custom bento box designed for the rear here behind the seat. It's something you see on a lot of other brands, and it'll give me a good amount of storage on this bike to let me have some additional tools and the flat kit. And because I only have one water bottle mount on the frame, another common upgrade is they do make a bracket to go behind the seat to let you mount a water bottle bracket behind the seat, which is a good place from an aerodynamic standpoint to have one. And then there are third-party options to have a hydration system mounted up between the aero bars, or a lot of people will even mount just a regular water bottle between the aero bars. So when the time comes, that also may be something I consider. So in the first couple hundred miles I have on this bike, I can tell you that the bike rides great. It is extremely fast and efficient, so it does not disappoint on those aspects. I will say that the handling of the bike is razor sharp and is very unforgiving. The time spent in the aero bars on my bear grease has definitely helped, but that bike is far more stable than this bike is, based mostly due to the geometry and the much larger tire size. This bike is definitely the twitchiest bike I have in my quiver right now, but I am adapting to it rapidly, and I'm getting more and more comfortable with it. And it's really kind of funny seeing that on pavement I can coast and kind of soft pedal it at speeds that I really have to work at to obtain on my fat bikes. So after I get the bike dialed into its final form with whatever I'm going to do as far as accessories and wheels and things like that, and get an opportunity to put even more mileage on it, I'll do a more in-depth review of the bike as far as how I feel it performs, and have some better data on exactly how fast it is. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, definitely leave those down in the comments below. And if you did find the video entertaining or informative in any way, definitely drop a like down below. And if you want to follow my progress on this bike or the adventures I have on any of my other bikes, definitely subscribe to the channel. It does really help out. And my agenda is jam-packed this summer with bike content coming to the channel. Thanks a lot and have a great day.